I wanted to talk a little bit about attracting wildlife to your plot, and sometimes seems a bit sort of counterintuitive really. You're trying to keep the pigeons away from your greens and the green fly away from all your crops and everything, and you kind of wonder if you just want to keep wildlife out. But actually most gardeners of course love their wildlife. It's all part of gardening, all part of the love of the hobby. But if you're not convinced just by the love of wildlife, then of course they do an awful lot of good. If you can attract insect-eating birds like blue tits and things, clear up an awful lot of your pests without you ever having to spray or reach for the chemicals. Lots of ways to attract them. Of course the obvious one is just feeding the birds. A few ideas here, and you'll all have your own. Obviously a good clean bird feeders. Do make sure you clean them regularly, because there's lots of diseases carried around on bird feeders which are dirty and not regularly cleaned. So hang plenty of those around the plot. Of course you can also grow wildflowers. Of course there's almost as many flowers as vegetables on allotments. So anything with simple flowers, anything you might use as a cut flower, are usually ideal for insects. So we're talking about things like bees, obviously, pollinating insects, which if you can attract those will also pollinate things like your bean crops, but also things like hoverflies. So the adults will eat nectar, but then of course the grubs will gobble up the green fly and keep your crops pest-free. Mentioned bird feeding, just made a bird feeder out of a simple log, drilled the log, some holes in the side, and you can buy these little suet pellets which are liked by lots of different birds, so you can put those in the holes, some holes in the top so that you can pour some, in this case some sunflower seeds just in the top, and the holes just help keep the sunflower seeds in there. And you can just sit that somewhere on the plot or tie it into a tree or whatever and just attract a few more birds to your allotment. And it's nice to watch them anyway, isn't it? So there's those things. Oh, we've got some mealworms here as well, some dried mealworms. That'll attract a lot of birds to the garden. So yeah, the more birds and the more wildlife you can attract, the less you're going to have to spray, the better your crops will do. Another idea, of course, is to have a pond. Just a simple wildlife pond, doesn't need to be very big or very deep. In fact, if you've got an old washing up bowl, you'll be amazed that you'll attract frogs and toads, maybe even a few newts if you're really, really lucky. Do make sure if you're making a pond that things like hedgehogs, which will come and eat your slugs, they'll often come for a drink. Make sure they can get out if they fall into the water. So whatever you use, whether it's or if you decide to dig a bigger pond or just use a small reservoir of water like an old bucket or an old washing up bowl, make sure they can get out should they fall in. So all things to attract wildlife, and as I say, the more you can attract the better. Obviously you're still going to have to net your brassicas, your cabbages and whatever against the pigeons. You'll have to do that whatever, but if you can attract insect-eating birds, frogs which will gobble up the slugs, toads, and get those in via building a pond, then your crops can only benefit from it.